Okay, we might kick it off. So if everybody's sitting comfortably. Firstly, welcome to this evening's webinar brought to you by Connacht Rugby in partnership with Clubforce, titled Bridging the Gap webinar, which is going to look at all issues and challenges that face us in developing young girls into not only club players but provincial players, and hopefully following on then into the national team. We're delighted to have Clubforce partner with us this evening. Clubforce are making sport happen by assisting volunteers and clubs in their registration efforts and their fundraising efforts, and particularly these have been a vital assistance to clubs over the last 12 months, as many efforts have gone online and clubs have found it really hard to connect with their membership. But Clubforce are there to provide assistance for that and are leading the way across Ireland and the UK in terms of the services and technology they provide clubs. So thank you very much to Clubforce for coming on board and assisting with this evening's webinar. I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm not too sure what way they appear on everyone's screens as you look at them, but from my left is Mary Fyfe from London Irish. She is the Director of Rugby at the London Irish Rugby Club, and we'd like to have Mary join us. Mary, hope the weather is as good in London as it is here in Galway. Alongside Mary from London is Daniel Webb, and Daniel is the London Irish Emeralds head coach. And then a little bit closer to home, we have Ross Mannion, who is the Connacht Women's head coach for the coming season. Alongside him is Fraser, who has been the Connacht Under-18s women's head coach over the last number of seasons and obviously had huge success in the last couple of seasons with that age group. And then last but not least is Irish international and Connacht representative Mary Healy, who is now evolving into a coach. Mary, you're sitting on the other side of the fence, but you still have plenty of days left to play rugby as well. But Mary is the skills and backs coach with the Clubforce Emerging Talent Squad as well, that's been established over the last 18 months to 2 years here in Connacht, and really is fulfilling the role of bridging the gap, as I mentioned at the offset of the webinar. Just to kick it off, I think it's fair to say everyone is delighted to have some sort of activity back on the pitch. I know Fraser, for example, Connacht have been very busy over the last couple of weeks and will be over the next couple of weeks as we get players back onto the field. Can you just give us a bit of background perhaps into the growth of rugby and in particular the women's game over the last number of years, and then the activity that's going on at this particular moment in time?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin, and thanks for having me. And delighted to be here with such excellent panelists, and even for myself, learning and getting a bit further insight into the women's game as well. I suppose I've been the head coach of the Connacht Under-18 since 2018. Wendy Hickey gave me the good spin pass. Would I take on the role? And then that was it. I was like, oh, is there a model we follow? What do we do? But then we just set about putting together a coaching team and going from there, and we achieved a success in the first year, but overall the developments been incredible the last couple of years. I remember we held 2 trial dates in Tuam the first year, and we had I think 50 players that trialed across the 2 days. The second year in 2019, going into an Interpro series, we had it was over 150 girls registered to trial. So I think even that comparison from on a year, was dramatic, in terms of the increase and the interest. And then even this year as well, we've got similar numbers screening. Obviously, a few more challenges. COVID has thrown us a few speed bumps along the way, but we're dealing with those. And at the moment we're going through screening processes in 4 different venues across the province to identify the players that we feel would be able to go forward into an Interpro squad for the Interpros coming up hopefully over the next couple of months, and then also just that wider group as well. How can we develop those players, and those players are represented from around 14-15 clubs across the province. So it just shows that, as the first year we had about 5 clubs that were represented in the squad. The following year, it was about double that. It was about 10 clubs you were looking, and and hopefully, you know, again this year it'll be more clubs that are even represented. So you can see that it's just, you know, around the whole province that, you know, the clubs and our, you know, our own development officers are doing a fantastic job to get girls into the game and ultimately keep them into the game.
And what do you think has driven that growth, Fraser? Like, you know, you mentioned that the club and community officers and development officers across Connacht, I suppose, have been given the duty of going into the clubs and the schools. But what has attracted so many young girls to pick up the game?
I think there's multiple, you know, different factors that you could say. I think you know, the first year that we happened, I tend not to speak about too much that we did win the Under-Pros that first year, but I don't, for me, it's kind of like, it's always nice winning, absolutely, but it was about the progression of those players, and it's great to see some of the players that were in that squad have gone on, you know, to represent Ireland, you know, in both 7s and 15s. And I think even, you know, the development of Bevan Parsons, you know, who was a member of that squad. And it just shows, you know, girls in the province that, you know, if they have ambition and drive and they've got that talent, you know, that, you know, they can achieve something special, and the pathways are there for them to develop. I think also just in general, you know, it needs to get better, but I think media attention and just, you know, broadcasting of women's rugby and the women's game is getting better. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, and I think, you know, Mary and Daniel probably have a greater, you know, knowledge of that side of things, you know, from their involvement. But I think also that, you know, exposure, you know, is good. You know, the day that we, you know, got presented, you know, on the sports ground pitch, we walked out with the boys team actually happened to win the 18s tournament as well. So it was just for me that image of both the under-18 girls teams and the boys teams walking out in the sports ground. You know, it was a really powerful image for me, and hopefully a really powerful image for parents and supporters and, you know, young girls that are out there that have that interest and, you know, and that ambition to push themselves.
Yeah, certainly. I think the broadcast of the Six Nations, for example, over the last couple of weeks on terrestrial TV here in Ireland was very powerful. And I know even I have 2 young girls as well, and even just to put on the TV and watch the game and to say, look, Bevan Parsons scoring a try against Wales and say she's only from down the road, I think it's something that caught their imagination as well. So long may that last, and long may that continue. It was interesting how you. I was going to ask you, how did you define success? And I think you kind of came about it in a way that, you know, you don't want to focus solely on lifting trophies. You know, you define success in other ways. I think that's something we'll touch on later on in the webinar, as well as we clearly kind of outline the path I suppose we want to create for young girls who are playing the game and as they develop along their playing career. You mentioned that there's a couple of weeks now of getting back on the pitch and going through the identification process for the next stage of the under-18s program. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for and how those events take place?
Yeah, so what we're doing it across 4 venues, and again, since we've got the green light to return to training on the 26th of April, you know, here in Ireland, it's been quite a you know, fast and, you know, manic process at times, just getting things organised. There's obviously a lot of considerations, you know, in terms of the kind of pods of 15 that we're working in, and, you know, health declarations that need to be completed. So in fairness, our team manager, Natalie Fox, has been fantastic from that organisation point of view, allowing us to, you know, ultimately observe the sessions and, you know, looking for, you know, the different aspects, you know, across the board. And I think, you know, from that identification process, it's fairly broad in terms of what we're looking for, and there's probably, it's a seesaw effect. I'd probably refer to it as that. You probably find that there's players that come in and that we see that maybe their technical skills are really good or at a certain level, and then on the other side there may be players that their technical skills or some of their technical skills might not be there, but in terms of their athletic ability or their athletic profile, they're just, you know, multi-sport athletes. So, you know, on that side, there's a lot, you know, of potential, you know, the same as someone who would be really good technically. And I'd say probably in the middle, sits that kind of game awareness aspect, awareness of space, that, decision making as well. And then, what we would class as, the no talent required, what doesn't require talent, that work rate, that effort, that, attitude that the players would display. So it's a broad range of things, that we're looking for. And it's not just the case, if I'm good at catch pass, that means, oh yeah, you're a definite, it's a broad range. And we're trying to, we've tried to implement a, really extensive process where those sessions are filmed as well, and then we can refer back to them afterwards. And ultimately, once we go through the process, we do have to select a squad, but we will be feeding back to clubs in terms of what we've seen in terms of the aspects that are maybe, at a really good level, and those aspects that could be, improved from there. And I think that's really important to let the coaches know and make them aware of how important their role is and their development of their players.
I think that's a really good point, Fraser. I think regardless of or in tandem perhaps with the work of Connacht Rugby CCRO officers and development officers, that there has been a growth in volunteers stepping forward and participating in the women's game as well, across all aspects of it, whether it's coaching or administration, and that has to be welcomed and encouraged too. What role do you see the club coach playing? You mentioned that you do give feedback to the coaches. What exactly are you looking for from players, or like what level of skill execution? What are the kind of the must-haves that a coach should be incorporating into his sessions so that players can step up to that under 18 age group that you're coaching at?
I think the basis of the core skills, is really key, and that they have to have some level of competence in those. That you'd be looking, again, different countries refer to different things, the rocks or the foundations, the pillars, but ultimately, catch pass, our contact skills is, what we do pre, during and after, when we're attacking, our support play and our tackle, those would be the specific aspects, more around the technical, and verging into the game awareness in terms of, evasion, and what decisions we make in certain, situations. So those would be big things that, myself as a coach would certainly encourage any coaches that are on, here to be incorporating into your sessions. And also, I suppose, taking a focus for a session, because I think sometimes as coaches, we want to correct multiple things, across the board, but if we can get those small wins on certain things, so if we design a session for simply catch pass, and we're just looking at those aspects of the catch early, trying to keep our hips square, we're snapping the head to look for that next target or that support player, if we can focus, on those and get them to a really proficient level. And I must say, you can see that already there's been a lot of work that clubs have done, in that aspect, when they've been allowed to train, and even, players taking it on themselves through kind of lockdown. It would be very easy for someone to get a ball and with their brother, sister, mum or dad, work on their catch pass skills.
You mentioned that a lot of the athletes are coming in and they can be quite developed in terms of their athletic ability. Is that because of they're involved in many different sports? Even at the weekend, Hannah Tyrrell, who's been playing for Ireland over the last couple of years, I believe she togged out for Dublin at the weekend. And so those skills are really transferable. And have you seen that? Have you seen the athletes transferring from one sport to another sport? And at what stage do you think they should transition then and solely focus on one sport?
Yes, it's an interesting question, Gavin. I think sometimes there's maybe a misconception that we would be like, you have to play rugby, you have to, and again, kind of narrowing players' focus, too early on. Like, that wouldn't be the case at all. That we'd certainly encourage players to be playing multiple sports, because again, those skills transfer across, and you can certainly see, from even our screening days, the players that play, football, just their spatial awareness, and even the kicking ability of some of the players as well. Kicking in rugby, I think sometimes, I actually didn't mention that in the kind of core skills there, but that would be one that I think nowadays is really important. The kicking game is massive, and how do you get the ball to space? You can run, pass, or kick. And if players can do that, and are getting you know, a regular level of, you know, obviously a different ball, but you're still, some of the techniques wouldn't be too dissimilar. And also, I think on that as well, you know, we're certainly encouraging them to play multiple sports, but also look after themselves. You know, we can't train 8 days a week. You know, I think that's important from the rehab point of view and giving yourself a rest, but absolutely playing, you know, multiple different sports.
I think that leads us nicely into the emerging talent squad as well, Mary, that you're involved in, and you're picking them up from that under 18s, under 19s level. Can you give us a little bit more background into the emerging squad and what you're trying to achieve with those players?
Yeah, so we kind of decided to try and bridge that gap. So the age group that's just over 18, and then try to keep them and get them into the senior team, because kind of what we were seeing is there's only really a handful of girls that have come up from under 18 into the senior squad, and we were either losing them before they even came in to the senior squad. So some maybe didn't feel like they could make that jump into the senior squad, or they'd come to the trials and then they'll come up against a very experienced player who's been playing for a long time, and then it can be a bit nerve-wracking. So the idea behind the Clubforce Emerging Talent Team was to try and give those players the skill and the tools and everything like that, and the confidence then as well to be able to make that jump and feel like they could. And so what we give them nutrition, we give them S&C, like position specific skills, and then we're also trying to get more games. So we have before COVID, we had actually planned to go over to London Irish and play them in a friendly game, which would have been huge. It would have been the first time we've done anything like that. But it would have been just massive for the players as well, because it puts into practice then what we've been training on and what we've been working on. And again, like, you just learn so much from games. So that was ultimately that is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to keep those girls engaged and give them more confidence, give them more skills to be able to make that step up to Connacht, and then if they can, then step up again to Ireland. And
how much contact have you with the players over the course of a week or the course of a season?
So at the moment, COVID kind of put a stopper to an awful lot of stuff. But at the moment, we're going to be starting back into training sessions, and I think it'll be twice a week. And
is that on field, or is that in the gym, or how do you balance that, Mary? So that
sorry, it'll be twice a week training, and then they'll have gym programs and stuff as well. So they'll have their S&C programs that they can follow. And then if they need any other resources, like if they're looking for extra skills, like we can provide that to them as well. So whatever position they need, the idea is that they can come to us, we'll give it to them, or we'll sit down and we'll make a plan based off what their goals are.
Well, I know you were very frustrated that you couldn't get a trip over to London to play London Irish.
Definitely.
Mary, you would have had the red carpet out. I'm sure you're well known for your hospitality.
The green carpet.
Green carpet, of course. In London, the hospitality is pretty good over there. Mary, if we can bring you in terms of the development of the game, how have you seen that through your eyes over the last couple of years, and what stage are you guys at in London Irish in terms of bringing through the next generation of young girls who want to aspire to play for London Irish and possibly Ireland or England, whatever their nationality is or their preferences?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. We're actually relatively new in the world of women's rugby, so it's about 5 seasons in the running, and in 5 seasons we've like, again, as what Fraser said, you know, we've enjoyed quite a lot of success over the last couple of seasons, which has made it easier to grow without a shadow of a doubt. But I think the London Irish brand is obviously world renowned; it's well known. But in terms of women's rugby, it was a starting from scratch for us. So in 5 seasons, we've moved through the leagues, from national leagues. We don't have a provincial setup like in Ireland. We enter into regional leagues, and we moved through the leagues over the last 3 seasons by promotion, and we're now a Champ 2 team, which is fantastic. And again, being in the championship obviously allows for and caters for that next, if you like, that next level of player. We aim and hope to field a second team this season, which will be in the top tiers of the national leagues, again making sure that we're kind of catering and facilitating all levels of the game, or all levels for the players. We have a nice little youth squad starting to grow in the amateur club, and coming through from under 11s the way it's age grade in Ireland, or sorry, in England, is under 11s, under 13s, under 15s, under 17s, and then adult. So our adult would be after under 17s. You know, in terms of the game itself, you know, we can't overlay the competition structure in the UK directly onto the competition structure in Ireland. It is slightly different. Where we are fortunate is that we have an elite competition called the Allianz 15s. It used to be the Tyrrell's 15s, now the Allianz 15s. That's a capped and a closed 10-team competition that's renewed every 4 years. And we've been, you know, it's been quite exciting times around London Irish over the last couple of weeks, because we've actually put our name in the hat to enter that competition in 2023 with a Premiership team, so a Premier's 15s team, which is obviously huge for the club. But you know, we have exactly the same challenges, I would say, just in a different shape and a different form, as you know, Connacht Rugby have for their emerging talent and their age grade players coming out of youth into adult rugby. And you know, as a club, we struggle, as you do, to try to come up with the right strategies, the right models, I suppose, to make sure that we're not doing exactly what you worry about, Mary, is we're losing them at 17, losing them at 18, or they come up. And actually, what good looks like at under 17s isn't what good looks like in adult rugby, especially at kind of the championship level. So, you know, the strategies that other clubs have in place are things that we're reviewing ourselves. But, you know, what's been very interesting to me is the Emerging Talent Programme that Mary and Emer and Wendy Hickey have put together down in Connacht. I think it's a fantastic coping strategy for that, to bridge that gap, if you like. But, you know, and that's why, you know, this webinar for me is both a learning curve, as well as, you know, hopefully we can offer up some of the strategies that we use over in the UK, probably on more the elite, the championship elite level.
And Mary, as you bridge that gap between the championship and the elite level, and even, you know, I suppose Mary and Fraser, if you want to jump in here at any stage as well, how do you strike that balance then between, you know, creating a really fun, enjoyment kind of all-inclusive environment, to having maybe an environment that becomes a little bit more pressurized, or you know, focused on success, or you know, as you said, progressing then from the championship side to Premiership side? Like, is there a concern that you might lose players in that regard, or are you more energized by that thought and that you'll attract more players? Or how do you strike that balance between, for the want of a better expression, almost going from an amateur to professional style environment, perhaps, where, you know, you're really striving for high performance? Not that you're not striving for high performance at the moment, but, you know, there's just that level of expectation, I suppose, put on players to step up. How do you manage that change?
Yeah, well, I think it's, you know, the magic word, I'll be the first to use it tonight, is pathways. It's making sure that, you know, it's not one at the cost of the other, if you like. It's really, really important that we maintain the community game. It's really important that we build and grow the youth program, so that, you know, whether it's at elite level or championship level, it's, you know, we have an organic feed, if you like, into that club system. You know, obviously the elite side of things, the Premiership side of things, the criteria is different. The pressures are different. It is the professional side of the game, if you like. However, what's really, really important, especially for my own championship side at the moment, is to make sure that the opportunity is available to them. You know, if firstly they want to step up to that level, but also if that's something that, you know, with the right development and the right strategies and the right model in place now at championship level, we can afford them that opportunity in 2023 and beyond. So look, there's no easy answer. I think that's why we're collaborating on this, you know, to come up with maybe shared experiences and shared opportunities to bridge that gap. But it's really is about pathways. I know it's a really overused word, but you know, there needs to be a roadmap, and it needs to be from cradle to grave, if you like, in that respect. Because you can, you know, that's a decision as well. You can focus on one particular area, be that the elite game, the community game, and get one area right, or you can decide that actually, for the good of the game and the good of the women's game, we need to grow it from grassroots up, which is a decision that we at London Irish would prefer to take.
Yeah, I think then naturally you'll progress, and those who aspire to achieve more will, I suppose, comes to the top in any case, if the pathway is there, and at least have a pathway in front of them.
Well, exactly. And I mean, as I said, the criteria and the entry level and etc. is different at different levels.
Yeah.
But it's about creating and certainly managing the opportunities as well. And that transition out of what you call the emerging talent program is our under 17s going into adult. We have exactly the same challenges in that step up for one 17-year-old might be a far different step up than another 17-year-old. And it's having something in place that allows for those 3, 4, 5 extra formative years to mean we keep them in the game. And that's something that we're looking to put in place as well.
So that when the likes of Daniel and Ross get them at that senior level, they're getting diamonds already polished, lads. Is that what you're expecting from now on with these pathways in place? Ross, I know, if I come to you first, I know that this will be your first proper season in charge of, coming into the first proper season in charge of the women's senior team here in Connacht. But you've seen, I suppose, the progression of these players through the pathway, and you're now working with them at a senior level, which must be exciting for you as well.
Definitely. I suppose I was, when I was in the infancy, probably in my coaching career, Nicole and Laura Feely were kind of starting out with Sligo, just kind of dipping their toe in to see what they like it in some respects. And, you know, that's part of what kept me kind of looking at it and seeing how they progressed and how rapidly they progressed through in terms of with the rep stuff. I think from our point of view, where we've probably bridged one of them gaps is that we had an established senior team, but there was nothing to back it up. So with the kind of birth of the 18s and how Fraser's developed that, and then Emer kind of put in place the emerging talent, like that's kind of started to shore that up now. So there is a kind of, in some respects, there is a little bit of a pathway there now. We're probably at the other end of that now, where we have to push that on even more again, into how we, I suppose, before COVID, we'd started to mirror part of the male pathway with our RDS. So I think that'll be a big help for coaches out there as well. So I think for in the girls' game and the women's game, I think if we can give more feedback there in relation to their growth as coaches as well as players, I think that's going to be really beneficial. So I think if we can incorporate workshops into how we can help the coaches grow, what we're looking for in order to help the girls. So by the time that they get to 16s and 18s where they're being screened for Connacht stuff, you know, some of them key skills that Fraser's talking about are getting polished. You know, they're never going to be perfect. I mean, even if you look at any of the pro teams, they still work on all the basics as much as something very technical. I think for me, one of the big things to look at now is, I think, with a lot of the group that's there currently in the seniors, is skill sets, athletic ability. The S&C stuff has come on so much. Probably one of the things I'd be looking now to drive on at that level is kind of our game awareness. You know, what we're looking at, what pictures we see in front of us, you know, what tools we're giving the players, and are they executing and using them at the right times. That's probably pushing on a little bit from where Fraser is trying to develop there. So I think we've done a lot of really good work there in establishing that emerging talent. And you know, the other part for me in terms of bridging that gap is the likes of Mary obviously stepping into the coaching role now, you know, and guiding some of the kids along from her experiences. You know, we want to have that kind of continuity and succession there, and keeping people in the game, you know, that have had that experience. So like that's a big one for me. And obviously with for Mary and Daniel, I know one of their links that they announced was with St Mary's in Twickenham. So I had a great time there for 3 years of my life in college. Probably too good of a time, but in my time there, London Irish established a link for 2 of the years, because Toby Booth was our coach in college there. So he established, I suppose, maybe now I'm sure Daniel or Mary will go into it a little bit more, but I know that link was really beneficial for both, because they were getting extra training sessions for some of their players that would have been potentially academy players at the time. They were getting exposure to midweek games, and then that transferred into on the pitch. And a good few of them lads all went on to be pro out of that generation. And Toby obviously went on into London Irish and further afield then now. But, you know, so I can see how beneficial that link will be for Mary and Daniel there, because if they're looking at that 17 to 18-year-old, it's your college going years. And it allowed them a big platform. You know, there's fantastic facilities, but at the same time, I think for for kids going there, the experience is brilliant. You know, it's a small closed college in some respects, so you don't get lost. Really, was my experience there. So I think that'll be potentially very, very beneficial to London Irish going forward with their program. You know, I suppose our next hurdle then would be like where Mary's getting to, London Irish are getting to, with looking at, I suppose, the pro game. I think that's probably our next hurdle in Ireland in general, is like the commitment and the sacrifice that the women are given to the game at that level is huge. You know, if they're involved in the provincial setups, if they're involved in many of the national. So I think, you know, you look at obviously we've had some like Edel McMahon has gone over to Wasp because she wants to further her career, and how can she get the maximum out of it and try and play as near to professional. So I suppose I think we have to try and see, can we put something in place there that we, if they have the ability to work here, if they have the ability to go semi-pro, like whatever it is, but that we push on now to create a more competitive level, probably at the adult level now, you know.
Thanks, Ross. And Daniel, if we can bring you in, you know, from what I gather, I think the structure perhaps of where maybe you select players is slightly different to Ross. You know, Ross might just look down perhaps into the emerging group or the under 18 groups coming up, and then right across the clubs to try and unearth a few players. Daniel, where do you primarily recruit your players from? And then, you know, again, what is the balance of the skill level or the physical attributes, and how do you manage then to harness that into a cohesive team and get everyone at the same level?
So thanks very much for having me, by the way. Good to see everybody. For me, for us, you know, myself and Mary, we have a lot of girls from different unis. So the women's game in the UK, a lot of girls come through the uni system. They're exposed to it quite early there, rather than at a lower level. And I think that's something that's changing slowly with time. But we do get a lot of players coming in through at uni level, and then you get groups together. So you'll get friends that will be friends, and likewise that will join the club. To talk about sort of the levels of what they're at. They come from, a lot of them come from sort of like what Fraser said earlier. They come from other sports. A lot of them, they've tried other sports, so they'll have different skill sets. And it's just, all you're doing is introduce them to a new game. And what we did to try and underpin that was work on, and we were lucky with COVID. And I'll say we were lucky. It gave us the time for the girls to sort of reflect on things. So we did a lot of sessions on theory stuff, a lot of videos, showing the girls other girls' games, but at elite level, so they could look at things and point things out and start understanding the game in a different way, not just it's a game of rugby, run around the field for 80 minutes or so. There's little bits going on all the time, and this is starting to really pay dividends now. We've gone into the training, because the stuff we looked at, what we did over the weeks of COVID, not knowing when we were going to come out, I started putting together little things I wanted to work on when I could see light at the end of the tunnel. So we underpinned the knowledge. So when we came to the training session, the work had been done. So then we worked on the basics, on the skills, on the hands, on the moving, on the S&C, and that's where we're at the moment. The knowledge is there. So we've done things a bit backwards, slightly different to what the guys are talking about there, because we've been locked away. So we've utilised that time of really growing the knowledge and the understanding, and then working on the skill sets that you need to execute those in the game.
I think that's a fascinating point, Daniel, because I think this is so relevant for every coach, no matter what level you're at. And obviously, as you progress up, the game sense and appreciation of how the game is played, and the little nuances perhaps in that, in terms of tactics and you know, how you can approach different aspects, whether you have the ball or you're in defence, is something it's really hard to strike a balance between imparting that knowledge to your team, but then also trying to equip them with the skills to execute that plan. So you might have a game plan where your fastest players on the wing and you want to get the ball wide to them, but you haven't got the skills to do that. So, like, if COVID hadn't impacted the last 12 months, do you think you would have changed how you were coaching? Or, you know, going forward now and you're back on the field, how much of a balance will you strike between that kind of imparting of the knowledge of the technical side of it, or the tactical side of it, and then the skills element of it? And I hope I'm kind of making myself clear. I'm just trying to picture a club coach because 2 nights, Tuesday and a Thursday night, has an influx of new players. Where do you strike that balance if you have an hour on the field, for example?
Yeah, so obviously when we've got the time on the field, we haven't got a lot of time. Obviously, it's twice a week and for a few hours. So we've got to utilize that stuff, doing the core stuff, doing our pillars, our, you know, whatever you want to call it, our building blocks. But then everybody's got social media now. Everybody's got, there's WhatsApp groups, etc. It's where we can build up a sort of a video base. We can share content. So we're not just training on the Tuesdays and Thursdays. There's content going forward. Girls are learning. Girls are firing ideas around, asking questions, and encourage that question culture. So when they do get there, they're asking different types of questions. They're now pushing the coaches when we come to the Tuesdays and Thursdays, because they know you can't tell them a lie. You can't sell them down a road that, you know, they've got an opinion now on that. They've seen it and they know what works and what doesn't work. And then they'll want to know how they can make that better. So it does push me as a coach because they're getting smarter. So for me, it's a good tool, and I don't think I'll drop it. I think it's something I'll keep. It seems to have worked really well of having that sort of knowledge build up and then the skills, because the buy-in from the players is straight away. So you'll get some girls that might not have the greatest pass of a certain hand, but they'll have the understanding they have to get to that point to achieve what they want to achieve on the field. So there's reasoning there before they act, basically.
And is that something that comes with maturity as well, or does that come with, you know, as the girls get more involved in the game, as they become more confident on the ball, or as they become more confident just in playing the game, that they become more inquisitive as well? Like, you know, just looking back maybe to Fraser at the under-18 level, how do you strike that balance where you're not piling information on top of them about, you know, the different nuances of the game, but then, you know, giving them the skills to actually just go out and play the game? Fraser, sorry, that's at you there.
Yeah, no worries. No, and even just what Daniel hit on there about that kind of online aspect, it's definitely something that we will utilize, you know, even going forward. You know, yeah, we'll have that time on the pitch, which is so important, but, you know, to be able to even set us up or, you know, give us that knowledge and understanding before we go out and do something. And obviously, just in terms of learning styles, you know, we want to cover all bases, because we know that what fits, you know, what fits me, you know, in terms of, you know, that you know, seeing a picture or getting that, you know, okay, the penny's dropped, to understand it, might not fit Ross, or it might not fit maybe. So again, we've got to realize that we have to try and cover all bases there, and even give, you know, the players an extra, you know, but that extra information if there's stuff that's maybe it's new to them. You know, I think at our level, in terms of the, you know, introduction, they're very new to the I suppose the way the rugby knowledge, and I'd kind of class it as it's both in a rugby education kind of on field and off field, you know, as Daniel hit on there, that if we can, you know, set up things before we go out and do them, and also get the girls asking questions, you know, because like we'd have a few players, you know, from previous years that they would be up at 8 o'clock in the morning watching the Super Rugby games, and, you know, asking questions about, you know, things, or did you see the Crusaders, you know, there? And, you know, that's brilliant. I think if we can get the girls even watching more rugby, you know, to even get that kind of understanding, you know, going and seeing the things, oh, you know, we did that on the pitch there, or that's okay, I get it now, you know, and it just fits in, you know, really well, you know, in that, and it's another piece of the jigsaw that you're adding in, and it fits in, I think, with what Ross mentioned about that game awareness and creating the different kind of pictures. I think what's also important for us at the 18s level, because we're the kind of first stop, you know, on that journey, you know, with that interaction of, and you mentioned it earlier, Gav, coming into, you know, what we're trying to, you know, it's a professional setup. We want to come in, and there's different additions that we can give the players in terms of those online sessions, you know, the nutrition aspect, the S&C aspect, but also for me, it's like, you know, the classic developing people as well. You know, it's not just all the rugby skills, it's, you know, even the social and personal skills. You know, I remember we had one girl come in 2 years ago and was just really quiet, really shy, kept herself to herself, didn't say a word for maybe 2 weeks, and we as coaches are looking around, right, how are we gonna bring, you know, this girl out the shell? How are we gonna bring, because she's a very good player. And then honestly, you know, after probably the third week, you know, was just interacting with everyone, was chatting with everyone, with the manager. A year down the line, we went to see her, you know, was coming up to us, oh, guys, it's great to see you. And it told us that she actually started the rugby in her school. So she drove that because of her, you know, experience of playing. She took that on board, and she's like, oh, I'm coaching and stuff as well. You know, and I was just like, you're just a completely different person from the first time I met you, which is just, for me, that's success in a sense, because, you know, it's going to help them, you know, further in life. But also as well, like I think it was the Man City director of football, that quote, talent will always get you in the dressing room, but, you know, how you behave in that environment will determine how long you stay there. And that's not something that's to scare the players away, but it's just to emphasize that as they go up the pathway, when they go to the emerging talent, or they go to the, you know, the seniors and even beyond, that the attitude that they go in with, and that kind of work ethic, what they do off the field, you know, when no one's looking, you know, when we're not there, is just, you know, so important. It's just to try and, you know, initially get that into the players, that the attitude is, you know, yes, you might be talented, but, you know, honing that attitude of always wanting to try and improve, you know, and knowing that you can get better. You know, again, something that struck me was we organised the webinar, just again utilising the online aspect last year when we were in lockdown, and we had Bevan on, and we had Kayla McAllister on, and basically I'd kind of put the question to them, so guys, what are your work-ons? And Bevan's response was, oh, I've got too many to mention, you know. And there's probably people sitting back there thinking, would she have any work-ons, because, you know, she can run it in from 50 meters, but it just shows the attitude of the player, that they constantly want to get better.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thankfully, my neighbour has, I think he's halfway through cutting his grass. So if you heard that motor in the background, that's what it was. It's his first time out this year, so he could be another while yet. But Fraser, I think it's a really good point you made there, and I think there's always feels like there's perhaps a pressure on the coaches as well at club level. You know, I do a bit of coaching myself at club level, but I've become more aware of the assumption that the club, or that the coach knows everything. Now, I'm coaching boys under sixes football and girls under eights football, and the knowledge they have of football is non-existent at the moment. And I feel the pressure to create an environment where they can learn and keep coming back. So for the coaches that are on this webinar this evening, can you give them just some nuggets perhaps of how they can go about creating that environment where firstly the players want to join the environment, but then also that they stay and they grow and they start their development and their pathway. You know, I think Daniel and Fraser, you've both said that you've utilized, you know, technology, whether it's clips on YouTube or your own analysis, and you've shared that with the team, and it's kind of opened up their eyes perhaps to other styles of play, like, you know, watching Super Rugby or watching international matches. You know, is there something like that, or is it that, or how do coaches engage players more so that they become more in tune with the game and kind of upskill without necessarily being on the pitch? Because as I mentioned, you know, some club coaches might only get 2 hours a week with their players, and that is, you know, we're all aligned here in terms of grassroots to green shirts. Happens that London Irish playing green shirts as well, so it fits in nicely this evening. But it is that starting path, that's the first step of this pathway that will kind of funnel through to you guys eventually, hopefully. So what are those little nuggets you can give the coaches that are tuning in this evening?
Daniel, maybe we'll let you come in first there, and then.
Yeah, no problem. So just one on, I wouldn't say ownership so much, but making everyone feel like they've got some worth. So what I like to, and I did it quite recently at the end of the session, is I gave the girls a bit of a puzzle and gave them no instruction. And some girls were asking, chomping at the bit, what do I do? What do I do? And other girls just started organising, and then it clicked, and they just came out of it. So I like to chuck in every now and again something that's a bit different, that I'm giving them no real sort of structure or no real boundaries, and then just to see how they react. because they can come up, and it does happen, they come up with things that I hadn't thought about, or a move or a line or a shape that I would like, wow, not seen that before. So there's a lot of buying into that for me, because they're buying into what I'm trying to sell, and then also I'm getting a bit back from them too.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Fraser, I might come to you next, and Ross, we'll come to yourself then as well.
Yeah, I really like that, Daniel, and I know I've done. I remember doing it once, and yeah, the looks on faces were just tell me what to do. Like, but for me, and it's probably a bit of a giveaway for maybe the summer, but I'm kind of toying with the idea of we play a lot of warm-up games and things, and just allowing a player to, you know, they go away and guys, I want you to come up with a warm-up game, and give them maybe a few conditions. You know, it's got to involve a ball, but just let them come up with it and see how they go about explaining it as well. And to be honest, if it's something that, you know, can be beneficial, or, you know, hits that base of getting us active, you know, initially and making us switch on and focus, then it'd probably be something that I'd steal off them. They might need to copyright it. But yeah, again, just trying to engage the players, you know, in different ways. I think for coaches, that just in terms of sessions, like if we can keep them, I remember the kind of apes principle for me always stood out when I started coaching, and it's that, you know, active. So is this, you know, is it active, or is there too much kind of, you know, we're just standing about doing nothing? Because I think if you get into that stage, it's very hard to get them back into the, you know, the intensity or the level. Then, you know, purposeful, again, if I'm choosing a drill or an activity or a game, you know, what's the reason for it? You know, what's the purpose? What's the outcome, or the thing we're trying to develop? You know, enjoyable, I'd say, is one of the most important, you know, to get them enjoying, you know, that session. And, you know, obviously overall though, that's that safety aspect, that ultimately it's safe. But that always stuck, you know, geez, it was probably about 10 years ago now, the first coaching course I ever went on, and that apes principle's always stuck with me whenever I'm doing kind of session plans or coming up with things, regardless of what level I'm working at, whether it be 18s or whether I'm coaching adults. You know, that really resonated with me.
And Mary, for those who are transitioning then from the kind of the club scene and then coming into the emerging clubs side, who have aspirations of playing at the provincial side or national side, you know, how serious do you guys get? Is it all very serious, or is there still elements of fun, or how do you approach that side of it? That the environment that you create, I suppose, how do you go about creating that environment that they want to be there?
Yeah, it's definitely not all serious. I like to keep things fun and like happy and positive and stuff like that. But then you also have a job to do, and you've a plan to try and execute. So I just try to keep everything, or we try to keep everything really open. So we mark what the training session is, what the goal is, what are we doing. And then there's some drills that we'll go into that are kind of like just express yourself. So it's not really like we're looking to get through the quality passes now. It just express yourself. I want to see you try to get from here to there without getting contact. So those kind of drills are a bit more fun. And then when you kind of get the energy up and people are buzzing and they're excited to be there, then that the want and the drive to execute things, to be sharper and everything like that, it kind of naturally looks after itself. So it's definitely not all serious. I'm not very serious myself. I prefer to be joking and messing, but also at the end of the day, then when you have to get stuff done, I will get it done. So that's what I try to bring into those sessions as well. But bring your own personal flair as well, because that's what we want to see. We want to try and unlock what's in the player, so they can really feel confident in themselves. And if they're confident in themselves, they'll be confident when they're playing as well.
And Daniel and Ross, I know that you're obviously the head coaches of the senior women's team then in both London Irish and Connacht, but there will be players there who aspire to go on another step and play for Ireland, as we mentioned, maybe play for England, perhaps, depending on their desires. How do you strike that balance then between ensuring that the team are playing cohesively and you all understand the game plan, but then continuing to support those players individually to improve their skills, improve their knowledge, and to step up again to a higher level? Ross, I might throw that one to you there.
Yeah, like I think when they're probably coming into that environment of an interpro team, they they would have probably aspirations of wanting to play for their country anyway. So I think again, a lot of it, I think no matter what level you play, you still play the sport because you love it, and it's got that fun element to it. As Mary probably alluded to there, and Fraser, like everyone switches on then in terms of when you're on the pitch and stuff like that. I suppose you're just there for them as a support. Feedback would be a huge one. Like we've done a lot already and put a lot of stuff together in terms of for some of the players that have asked. Like we're starting back on the pitch this day next week, but some of the players have asked for feedback already on previous games and sent video footage. So I'm only too happy to put some of that stuff together, along with Guilherme, who's helping out on that side of it with the video analysis. So I think that obviously helps them progress, as Fraser alluded to there. And that's one thing I've even found the last week, being out in the ground with the under-18 screening, is that the girls are all asking for feedback. Like, so Fraser was trying to show some of his micro plays and bits of that, and what I just found brilliant was that some of them weren't getting it initially, but they weren't afraid to keep asking until they could get the picture in their head of the why, and then they were able to go and apply it. So I find that quite exciting now, that's the kind of environment you're going into, where they're hungry to learn, they're not afraid to ask you questions and challenge you. As Daniel was saying as well, in some respects, and alluding to, it is kind of, it has to be player led in some respects, a lot of what you're doing. So it's like you're going back to when you're doing your coaching badges at different levels. The coach teaches or the coach guides, and I think it's implementing them. That you're expressing your opinions on rugby and stuff like that, but you do want to be challenged as a coach with it. And at the end of the day, the 15 players that are on the pitch at any one time, you don't have a massive amount of control on what's happening out there. You have to let them feel the game and then apply everything to it. So I suppose you are there as a bit of a guide and a support for them, and try and give them every opportunity to break down that barrier and try and get to if their ambition is to play international rugby, and obviously you're trying to link in with the national setup to find out, well, what's the why if someone's not getting selected, if someone was in a squad and isn't, we as coaches of the provincial side need that feedback, so we can help that player develop and help that player come back into the provincial setup and feel comfortable and want to play provincial and want to push on again.
Can I jump in on that as well?
Yeah.
No, there's just one thing. What Ross was saying there is, when as a player and a player who really aspires to go to that next level, you have 100 work-ons, you have 100 things to fix, and that was one of the things that I used to do as a player, is that I needed to fix like 100 things and need to be excellent at them all. But my coaches would be 3 things per game. That's all you work on. That's all you focus on. So that was able to control me and my desire to be excellent at these things. And it was something that was really, really helpful as a player trying to get to the elite level, was just the focus. So I thought I'd just jump in on that.
Yeah, just it was the same thing as Mary, but it was one of the lads there at work actually said it, because I was doing some analysis for someone, and I suppose you're focusing on work-ons in some respects when you're doing analysis, and we kind of sometimes tend to forget, like Mary's probably saying there as well, that nearly every player has a superpower, was what one of the lads was saying, and it is true. Like, so someone has great go forward, someone is very good at distributing, someone is very good at kicking. So if they have that and it's getting to them to a certain level, is yes, use that superpower in some respects. Try and develop the other things, but not to get too bogged down on them. Yes, do work on your work-ons, but yeah, not to forget about what your main go-to is.
And then,
yeah, I think, sorry, Gav, just briefly, but yeah, Andy having Saturn and stuff, Andy Friend's done, with the senior team, but yeah, he referred to it as weapons and work-ons, and just focus on those weapons and make yourself world class at those nearly, and use them, because those are your superpowers. There will be work-ons, but use the things that you are already very good at.
I think that they're great insights, and I think, just conscious of time as well, but finally, just go back to Daniel and Mary in terms of the pathway that London Irish Club itself is on. And, it's been great tonight to be able to have this partnership and to share information. How important is it for rugby teams, rugby clubs, in particular yourselves in London Irish, to leverage partnerships with other sporting clubs, organisations? Ross mentioned earlier with St. Mary's. How important are those types of partnerships to you as you look to progress, beyond the championship level into the premiership level over the next couple of years?
So regardless of progressing into the Premiership, having an education partner like St. Mary's, which is, it's a local university to where we're based in London, but it's a local university that I've always felt has had a very Irish leaning. And by that, I mean, it very much services our brand and what what we stand for as a club, but also any Irish player that potentially is coming over to the UK, whether it's further education or whether it's, looking to further their sport, and education is a secondary to that, to have that sort of link that we can offer out. And as I said, that wraparound that we can extend as a club is hugely valuable, both to us and to the university. It's more than a sporting partnership. It's about building an opportunity for players who aspire to play rugby, but if they change course along the way, then there's an opportunity in terms of career and staying involved in the game. And again, having strong people in the game around the women's game is hugely important for both the longevity of our club, but building I feel like a high performance situation or a institution in St. Mary's for women's rugby. St. Mary's is a fantastic institution, and when they put their mind to, if their athletics program is world class. So I've no doubt that now that we have this partnership in place, if we put our minds to it, we will become equally as world class for rugby, for women's rugby. And to be able to be affiliated with that is huge for London Irish. And hopefully any Irish player that aspires to have an education and a sporting career in London, that something like that is very attractive to them.
No, I think the ambition is clear for everyone to see across both clubs, across London Irish and Connacht, in terms of the future growth of the women's game in particular, and also just to provide the service, and as you mentioned there, Mary, the wraparound, the kind of holistic view of or elements to the player, not just being able to sort of throw a pass, throw a pass from your left to your right. That there's a lot more that goes into creating a player and helping them progress down the pathway from the underage player to the emerging talent to the senior player, the Emeralds, or with the Connacht senior team, and then we'll all love to see it, similar to Bevan Parsons and Mary in your career, progressing on to the Irish team as well. So I think the ambition has been clear to see tonight, and the passion for the women's game is very clear to see. And I think we could have gone a lot longer than an hour, and certainly I think there's more areas we could have discovered and gone down into. But this is the first of a 3-part series with Clubforce in terms of Bridging the Gap webinars. So thank you very much for your time and expertise this evening. Thank you very much for everyone who has joined us, and we look forward to giving you more information on the next webinar in the coming months, and we look forward to you joining us then as well. So, good evening all.
Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you.